Okay, recording. Let's go to the face melt. Veteran Council, Veteran Council. Discussion. 1 moment, preparing video. Okay, going live. Hello, everyone. My name is Etienne Fontan. I'm a council member of the Veterans Action Council. I'm a combat veteran of Operation Desert Storm. I'm a patient advocate in Berkeley, California. I want to welcome you to tonight's Veterans Action Council Roundtable number 13, Cannabis Discrimination. This one is going to be a very interesting discussion and one that will take us kind of all over the place. So I want to make sure that we're all in a good place. And it seems that we all are. So I want to thank our council members for being here tonight. More will pop in as the night goes. We seem to have Dwayne Von Etzen, Ricardo Prieta, Tony Landry, and Rafael Rivera. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. We're going to start off as tonight we only have one question because recently in the news, we've been once again highlighted with an old friend and nemesis in our lives that we all find out once we become cannabis users. Is that we have to hide who we are, and what we do sometimes amongst when we're out in society because there is active and real discrimination that we experience. Everything from family members all the way to employment. And there are no certainties when it comes with cannabis. And many of us have found our own way through this world, but we've also found ourselves also challenged by the different levels that this discrimination has permeated our society at so many levels. So without further ado, the question of the night basically is with what is happening regarding recent hires at the White House, or we should say fires at the White House, what does this highlight to us cannabis users regarding the discrimination we've experienced for decades? Now, I kind of want to go off on this one a little bit, but I'm going to save that. And I'll turn it to our other council members. So who would like to start on this conversation? Don't all speak up at once. All right, Dwayne.
So my name is Council Member Dwayne Von Eitzen. I'm an Army veteran. I served with the Army's 82nd Airborne Artillery and enjoyed my time. I'm currently based out of La Jolla, California. In regard to my thoughts on the firings in the administration and the tone that sets, as far as states' rights, or in the case of the District of Columbia, the rights of the residents of that location, I feel there's certainly a precedent being set in the wrong direction where cannabis use is legalized for recreational purposes. And we have an obligation to permit the rights of that place above all else. I think that should, and unfortunately does not, supersede the federal government's prohibition. But that certainly speaks to a lack of rights. So that's my thoughts immediately.
Council Member Pieta, did you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, it's unfortunately, it's just a reminder of the status quo. That's not going anywhere. The disappointing thing in my eyes is how the individual campaign was run. The Biden campaign leading into his election, right? What was said to our community, assurances that were made. This is a new day, support us, right? Give us your votes. And then as soon as they're in the office, it's no different than any other prohibitionist out there at the end of the day. I don't see an ally. This is not the act of someone who's your friend, someone who's your ally. And so for me, it's just an unfortunate reminder that we still have a lot of work to do to break down these barriers. We have a lot of education to do, right? We need to, I guess, reach more of these legislatures, but it's difficult when they just apparently have their mind set on how they want it to go, regardless of the education they say they want or need in order to make better decisions. By better decisions, starting off not discriminating against people, starting off there with the basic level of respect, seems to be too hard. So I hope that through the pressure campaign that's developing of patients and people who want to live normal lives, quote unquote, normal lives with a job without having to explain what they do in their off time, their recreational time, or what's in their medicine cabinet. I'm hopeful to, be able to get there at that point someday.
Thank you, Council Member. Council Member Tony Landry.
Yeah, thank you. It's always great to be here amongst the veterans. And my name's Tony Landry. I was served in the Navy and through 1988 through 94. And I'm a medical refugee from Louisiana. Talking about discrimination, that right off the bat, when you have to leave your state, your family and everything to get access to cannabis, it's like the ultimate discrimination. But and along the lines of the White House, I don't know if unfortunate's even a word to say what happened there when you have a federal agency that has approved Epidiolex and medicine for that stems from cannabis, and they don't take into consideration that maybe these folks that they fired were using it for a medical reason. It's just it seems to me like it's got to be rooted in maybe some political move that they did that, or I don't know, maybe it's just cannabis, but it's like the ultimate discrimination, medical discrimination. You have a right, we all have a right to our health, and it's a United Nations right. And when you start putting people out of their home states and stuff to find this cannabis, when we coming up more realization that it's all a medicinal plant and good for our bodies and everything, it's really getting to a point where you could start saying it's criminal negligence on the government's part, to have a medicine approved and then to be firing people for using it in the past. So, it's medical discrimination. I'm gonna stick to that.
All right. Councilmember Rivera. Introduce yourself and what are your thoughts?
Hey everyone, happy to be here. I am Rafael Rivera, U.S. Army Reserve veteran. Spent 22 months in Afghanistan. Dwayne, I would left seat right seated with 82nd, so it holds a special spot in my heart. They were like the big brothers that never wanted me, so I felt like a younger brother. No, it is interesting. I was going to reference the prohibition aspect. But even in the yoga world, I share yoga, well, shared more actively prior to COVID. I was asked actually to not use cannabis by my first yoga instructor, one of my first, sorry, yoga instructors when I was working. And I couldn't even believe it when a yoga studio almost looks like a head shop. And dealing with other veterans that are police officers, and having the hardliner mentalities of, well, this is wrong, this is how it is. And instead of educate, they perpetuate, or, and I did that to a certain degree. And so for me, the discrimination aspect kind of, I want to say it goes more along the lines of social taboo almost. It felt like a lot of the reefer madness still exists to a certain degree. And that archaic thought process truly blows my mind when I look at even alcohol usage, where and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not that great with history, but prohibition lent itself to more criminal enterprises developing. It lent itself to more excuse to use force, and even what as far as having the government poison some of the alcohol in order to, to keep people from using it. So I think we're seeing a big change in it. But I'm not entirely confident that I trust the system, especially being that for the VA, I can get a 90-day script with, for whatever, any sort of medicine that has a fatal dosage, but it's like a mind, can I curse on there? It's a mind fuck to even consider being given cannabis. And yeah, I mean, for me, I know that it helps me. I know that it offers me a space to kind of hit the clutch and let the motor run, but I don't have to move forward. And that sometimes is the difference between life and death for me, given that I contend with depression and the aftermath of dealing with the war. So yeah, I'm hoping that even just being a part of this influences the future so others don't have to suffer as much. So thank you for letting me share. Audio.
Thank you, council member. Sorry, I started speaking without unmuting. It's a habit that happens sometimes. For me, it's disappointing to say the least. The why these firings leave a bad taste in our mouths. It sets a bad tone after dangling, changing prohibition in our faces, and they ran, by having somebody as the vice president who was, had used cannabis and talked about even, legalizing it. But also shame on us. He wrote half the legislation of the drug war, in the later. So, it's no surprise, and, we should have called the scorpion for what it was. And some of us did, and we had, but, once again, we were left with very little choice. And we made the better choice, I think. But in the end, that's why it's an old familiar friend and foe to us, this discrimination. For me, it's an open sore that gets reopened every time, because it takes me back to after my war, when I was confused and given more than enough pharmaceutical options to shake a stick at that I didn't like. And I found relief in this cannabis. And I was kicked out of my own home by my father because he didn't understand my medical use. Sure, if I wanted to drink, cool, but you're using way too much of that stuff. You got to go away. You smell. So I felt it in my own family, speaking to the VA about it when I needed to, want to get off these pills and just to acknowledge my cannabis use. No, forcefully removed, loss of benefits, and it wasn't so well understood back then about medical, marijuana use, and most thought I was joking. Declared a non-drug user and just kind of dispelled and dismissed away. Fortunately, I had an avenue and friends that, definitely fought through it and took the change and accepted where I was, but I did not accept where I was and change that perspective so that I have a perspective and a lifestyle that is more conducive to my access of medical cannabis. But that was without its own blood, sweat, and tears along the way. And again, further reminders of how deep, this prohibition goes. Never a blemish on any of my military record. 1 year analysis for THC, kicked out, gone, initially given a dishonorable discharge, fortunately changed later to an honorable with an asterisk, but that's just the discriminations you can just experience by going through. What did we have to deal with? Have to deal with piss tests. But why? Because they have to know if you're using this drug or not. So we've all had to experience, urinalysis or forced urinalysis to make sure that we have and have access to, um, cannabis. Pharmaceuticals all day long. You can make excuses for, drinking. I watch guys drink alcohol and do stupid shit. It gets excused for and given the attaboy for, but if it comes to one experience with drugs, needless to say, you're, run out and run off forever. And as we all know, as regular cannabis users, just because I use today has no bearing on where I am tomorrow. And so to think that someone's past marijuana use has a bearing is also, again, to another slap in the face to our intelligence of how absolutely vapid they are in their absolutely wicked defense of this indefensible reality that they have forced upon us, that we play through on such a basis that, again, I'll talk to here after we hear from another council member, but I want to talk about a simple reality that happens with our recruiters that we all experience while getting recruited. But I will now defer to Council Member Michael Crowitz for his thoughts on this issue.
Thanks, man. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm in kind of a dark space right now and can't see me all that well, but you can hear me hopefully okay. I wanted to get kind of caught up on the subject a little bit, so I went to the White House's press office's statements and looked at a few news clips before I joined the call today. And the best I could figure, there was a new policy where the old policy was that the what do you call it? The United States Special Secret Service would actually bar people completely for any past marijuana use. And evidently there were, kind of statements made and positions taken that gave new people coming in, this administration, new staff people, especially coming in that are younger people that live in places where marijuana is legal, especially, were given the impression that they should be completely open and honest with with the Secret Service about past marijuana use, that it wouldn't be held against them, and that they would be allowed to be hired. And in fact, I'm not certain of the numbers, but there are apparently at least some people who were hired and are part of the White House staff who actually did, divulge past marijuana use. That's the implication of the statements that I read. The other implication of the statements that I read was that people feel misled, that they're, especially, like I said, younger staffers from states where marijuana is legal, felt like they were lulled into being very honest and then had that used against them. So that there's that, kind of maybe there was more divulging of past marijuana use this year than in past years. They just knew better than to even say anything about it before. So, that might have kept it from coming up as an issue, which I think lends well to what Etienne has in the bag for the next comment, next round of thoughts about recruiters, when there's willful ignorance. But anyway, I think it's it's just one of these many things where U.S. federal law saying that marijuana is illegal and it has no medical value stands in the way of freedom, of democracy, of our constitutional rights, of our ability to, just enjoy the most basic, freedom and prosperity of that were promised under our founding fathers' Declaration of Independence and all. It's really a conflict. It's an increasing conflict. The marijuana laws are an increasing conflict, and we are privy to some of the worst case scenarios of this, where people are barred from housing, people are barred from transplant lists, people, military veterans who have served honorably in the United States military and were honorably discharged from the United States military, but somehow never made it through the process to become U.S. citizens in that process. Again, this may be a small number of people, but I'm always interested in these small cases. They sometimes represent big flaws in our system. And in this case, how can we as a military force allow someone to go through 4 years or 2 years or however many years of their military service without, gently helping them become a citizen along the way, allowing them to get through that entire military service, and having us not provided them an easy path to citizenship already is a flag to me. But then if you manage to get out of the service and you're a military veteran, you serve in the United States military, but you use marijuana, you can be expelled from the United States and not allowed back in. The United States does not need to let you into this country if you're not a U.S. citizen, if you have anything to do with marijuana. Again, U.S. federal law. So these are just prejudices. I mean, this is well beyond prejudice. This is written into the law. To me, I think I'll end with this thought, that every single moment of every single day, once we learned as a society that law was incorrect, that there was indeed medical value to cannabis, for example, because the Schedule I federal law says it doesn't have medical value to cannabis. So once we learned it did have medical value to cannabis all alone, that was the day where that law became a lie. It actually became a embedded piece of incorrect information in law. And every single day it seems to perjure itself and diminish its capacity as a law under the United States Constitution. And I wonder if it has any real value today as a law with the right legal representation in court. I think the law is meaningless. So.
Thank you, council member. That's quite enlightening, to say the least. Yeah. Which, carrying the conversation forward, this discrimination is so absolutely permeating through all depths of our lives that even before we even raised our right hand to swear, we are all met with a guy called a recruiter. Everyone here met a recruiter. Everyone here heard the sales pitch. They're basically the advertising department for the United States government. They know all the references and tell you all the shiny objects and wave a little bit of a bonus in your face and tell you what you're going to do and what you're going to see and how absolutely glamorous and awesome it's going to be what you're deciding to do. And, so they're already taught to lie to you. Okay. So don't get us wrong here. It's not a surprise that, recruiters are taught to lie. Everybody comes out after signing and going through a bit of their service, realize that, hey, he sold me a little bit of goods here. That's nuts. So right there, but hey, it goes what it goes. It is what it is. There's a lifestyle that recruiters have and do. Regardless, one of the things they are taught to lie about is cannabis use outright. They are taught because everybody is asked, because there was a specific question that a lot of us went through is, have you ever used marijuana use? It's a standard question on every, question when you enter the military. And we all had to answer either no or I tried it once. And my drill sergeant, because I had tried it more than once, I had smoked some crazy Mexican and multiple times, and I liked it. And I told him, he's like, "How many times you smoked weed?" And I was like, "Around 40." He's like, "No, kid, you only tried it once, right?" "Yes, I only tried it once." "Okay, you only tried it once." So, everyone here was told, to do this sort of situation so that they can make their numbers, because this is a specific question, because the discrimination goes this, it had to be this specific drug and having to do with it. And then on top of that, when we went through, we also had to actually pee into a cup and submit that cup so that, well, we don't know whatever happened to that cup. We have no idea. It disappeared into a portal, and either we were go or no go, and that's how things went. And the majority of us went right to that next spot. So it's just fascinating sociologically how inherent this discrimination is, and how we're all playing along, so to say, and touching on what Michael was talking about, on how this law that none of us follow or believe in or seem to step towards, but yet here we are all soaking in it and have all experienced it at multiple points of our existence, but definitely when we joined the military. So anybody want to speak toward that experience or what it was like? Ricardo Prieta.
Yeah, I'll go, and I'll reintroduce myself since I didn't introduce myself the first time. My name is Ricardo Pareda. I'm from Tucson, Arizona, right? Served in the Army, Military Police Corps, overseas in Iraq, OIF2, and medically discharged, permanent and total rating from the VA. I grew up smoking weed. I started smoking weed when I was a little itty bitty kid, right? And I kept smoking weed all the way through adolescence. And the only thing that really stopped me was knowing that to get in the military, I couldn't drop hot, right? But I got caught after work one night at a friend's house, coworker's house. It wasn't a friend, it was a coworker, an acquaintance. And we were smoking weed around the table or whatever. And it got to me, and I look up, I got a joint in my mouth, and I look out the window, and there's two cops right there. Boom, jig is up, nowhere to run. They saw me, it was over. So I took the biggest hit that I could, put it back on the whatever, took my licks. Ended up doing 2.5 years of probation off that, half a joint that they saw me do. Not because of that, but because I caught subsequent charges. And I never dropped clean. Not once did I drop clean during probation. My THC levels increased while I went on probation. That's a fact, right? And so when after 9/11, I wanted to get in the military. I needed to get in the military. I knew that that was what I needed to do right then. And so I started doing the delayed entry program stuff. And it wasn't hard to figure out kind of what lifestyle I was coming from based off the tattoos that I had, my general mentality at the time, right? And so when the question of cannabis came up, my recruiter was like, look, man, all that other stuff, that's juvenile record. They can't get it. So when I ask you how many times you did cannabis, what are you going to say? And I tried it. Right. So, yeah, I tried it. I didn't like it. Not at all. I fucking hate it. Right. Boom. I mean, all my other tests I was in, my physical stuff, my acuity, my ASVAB, all that stuff. It was that pesky little question about cannabis use. And so when it worked, I just kept it like that, man. I really didn't tell anybody. It didn't come up in conversation until I was downrange with my friends, my squad members and stuff. We're chopping it up. I mean, it's a little different when there's a strong possibility that you might die at any given moment. When you start talking about real shit, it's like, so guys, hey, this is kind of how I found my way into this little circle. And I had friends of mine literally say, how the fuck did you become a cop? You know, and then besides that, how'd you get in the Army, right? But I did my job. I did my job well. And when it comes to this issue, I feel strongly that not only is the military losing out on a lot of good potential troops, people who can add value to the force, right? But also when we talk about public servants in general, elected officials and stuff like that, and not the elected officials who use it as like a tagline. Oh, I smoked pot once, didn't inhale. That's some douchebaggery, right? There's people actually using this stuff for recreational purposes, yeah, because it's a safer alternative to booze, but for medicinal purposes as well. And that needs to be respected. So I think that this is one of many roundtables that we have where this is just an initial conversation, right? I'm sure that there's plenty other council members who have an opinion on this, but it's evolving. The situation's fluid. And I thank you, Michael, for providing that those factoids, because I have to be honest, I didn't look into it. I was just like, well, whatever the fuck, this is just nothing new. So it really didn't change anything from my perspective, except for fight harder, right? And when people do this kind of thing, right, blatant bigotry and being mean and cruel to people who they don't like, that's a sign of weakness. And when we have what we have behind us, which is the truth, we have no reason to fear, right? Discrimination or whatever. We take it as a badge of honor, really, in my opinion.
And there you have it. Now we'll go over to Council Member Michael Crowitz.
Hey man, thanks. So yeah, inspired by Ricardo, I'll introduce myself. Michael Crowitz. I'm out in Southwestern Virginia. I served in the U.S. Air Force in peacetime of the Cold War in the 1980s, and got injured in a motorcycle accident that I had on the island of Guam, USA. Yeah, it's strange. You know, I'm looking at this from my perspective now, you know, as a older guy, having already raised a child, and I think I have a very different perspective on this one than I probably would if you asked me when I was just into the military, and especially given the experiences of those around us that have had very, very similar, very consistent experiences. I mean, just too consistent and too far apart to be anomalies. And it seems that the recruiters certainly lie to people. I mean, that's kind of famous, you know, the way they sort of spin the whole experience to make it sound good. But I think they, in this case, seem to be lying to the military more than us, because in every case, you know, they're getting the honest answer from the people and then filtering that for the military. And if they're doing that in some sort of organized way, that means the military is working with them on this fraud. And if you look at it from that perspective, again, from my perspective at this time in my life, it seems like the military is actually being somewhat of a rebel here and saying, you know, we don't believe in your Controlled Substances Act. We don't subscribe to it. We're going to figure out a way around it by having our recruiters lie to us and not tell us about it. But there's another thing that jumps out at me too from this adult perspective, and that is the inappropriate level of responsibility that we give to that person on the ground to vet people using this as a filter. It's just like a street cop. You know, if 90% of the people around them are guilty of a crime of marijuana possession or whatever, they can use that, as we've seen, you know, in policing, where if you're African American, you face what, 2 or 3 times the likelihood of getting arrested, prosecuted, and convicted for marijuana than you do for the same person who's not Black, who's doing the same thing, the same place, the same time. So I think that what you're probably seeing is just the tip of the iceberg. I bet you there are a lot of people, if you look at the statistics of those who were rejected from military service during these time periods that we're talking about here, I wouldn't be surprised if you're going to see it fall along, racial lines, economic lines, inappropriate vetting, stereotyping, and what do you call it, profiling. That's my input on that.
Thank you. I'll take it over to Councilmember Rivera.
This hits home for me a lot. You know that without incriminating myself, because I don't know how it goes with benefits. So I have heard that story be told many times with the recruiter. But I wouldn't say that they're rebelling against it. I think based off of numbers, I enlisted at 17. Their business is getting people in. So as long as you don't have track marks on your arm, you're not blowing fucking rails, I guess they're good with that. And even when we get into the military, I always had this preconception that, this the military, and yes, it gave me a sentiment of discipline. But then you realize like drug abuse is drug abuse even in the military. And to have that be the taboo, especially with cannabis and the way that it's implemented in policing brown and Black communities, this is something that transcends just the veterans community. I said this in another veteran group that we're a part of. I said, yes, we are fighting for our veterans, our sisters, our brothers' rights to access, but this is a human right. This is a human rights deal for me, because if this is what they're fighting, and when I use cannabis, the last thing I want to do is cause harm, I can understand why this has been off the table. Like, no way, Jose, we can't have people use this. So seeing the changes happening is exciting. However, it's also a level of, well, yeah, it's about time we started to recognize with this. And if I know it's not part of the topic, but in the time that things will get easier, just the same way that they did with alcohol. And I don't like saying that cannabis and alcohol should be the same, because I don't know that there's a medical benefit to alcohol, even though I drink beers, and I'll throw back some tequila. Not trying to make myself out to be like all goody two shoes. But there is that level of the military is complicit in how many people have been affected negatively, whether it be being profiled by the police, using it as a means to search your vehicle, to jam you up even more. Rico, that hit home for me that you got jammed up when you were young. I got jammed up when I was hella young too. And it was over silly things. And the recruiter said, nah, that's sealed. You don't have to worry about that. It's like, are you serious? So why was it even a serious problem to begin with? Okay, medical alcohol that you can wipe your arm with. Okay, fair enough, Michael. I like that. But really, it comes down to an understanding that, yes, they are legalizing this stuff, but now we have to kind of reconcile for the generations of people that are affected negatively by it. So, yeah, that's all I got in regards to this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Going over to Councilmember Landry.
Yeah, the recruiter, whenever I went in the military, I knew ahead of time I needed to clean up, and I probably stopped a couple weeks before I got to, they call it DEPS or whatever, departure station. And that night, I remember having to drink some pickle juice. That was what the word on the street was: drink pickle juice, and you'll pass the urinalysis. So that's what I did. So I don't know. I made it under the radar, I guess, or either either they needed an extra warm body or something. But I made it through. But I imagine it was by the skin of my teeth, because I know I didn't smoke a lot before I went in the military, but I did partake between the years, 18, 19 years old, till I didn't join till I was 26. But yeah, it's ironic how you get, it's okay before you go in, but you get discriminated once you're in or after you're out. It's like whenever I got out the military, for about 3 years there, I was working in the community, joined the American Legion, and I wasn't facing a lot of discrimination because everybody, oh, yeah, the military, oh, and so, but the minute I hurt my back and get started on not working and having to take pain medicine and stuff, I could feel a shift of the energy, when I'd go places, and sometimes it was probably just because I was so messed up on pharmaceutical meds. I'd go to my children's basketball games and just kind of be like out of it, not talking with anybody and just kind of isolating. And so, it's discriminating to get injured and go through that. And then when you try and get away from there and you use medical cannabis, you face it again. And it's just, unfortunate, especially when folks coming back with some of the injuries that I've met in the group here. I didn't go overseas, and my injuries were peacetime injuries while I was active. But to face some of these folks in this meeting here have seen and went through, and then to come back and face discrimination for using cannabis, all because of Nixon. It all started there, with Nixon's anti-war, and racial, war against American citizens. That's what happened. It's his story. And we're still facing it now. And I believe all these laws, as we change them, because we're changing them, and as we change them, we need to put in something to repercussion from before. Like if we make it legal down in Louisiana, they're gonna make it legal to sell cannabis as a forerunner to having a legal system. But that bill ought to include expungements right off the bat. If it's legal to sell it now, it should have expungements and prison reentry programs with scholarships for people that's been in prison for cannabis. When they come out of prison, they ought to have a path to some kind of micro business at, a special above anyone else, that's been in, especially a veteran, because veterans are getting locked up when they're coming out. I follow some of these groups on Facebook, and they're getting locked up for cannabis for small charges. And we help some of them get out of, with the letter, Sean Worsley. But all the laws, as they change them, we need to make sure that we put in some things to make up for what happened, and not a pathway to expungement, automatic expungements. So.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be an experience we could all live with. And we'll turn this over to Councilmember Dwayne Bonetson.
Hi there. The personal discrimination that I've dealt with seemed to be more so on a self-chosen or inflicted level. After getting out of the military, based on some knowledge that I had acquired in my childhood, I had decided to grow dreadlocks, and for 4 years, after I grew my hair out, had it dreaded up. And then I moved to California and attempted to enter the cannabis industry. And the discrimination that I experienced was on a business level, that people found it lacking professionalism. and it prevented me from working with some people that don't do business with people that attract attention, and they looked at it as something that was attracting negative attention. So again, it was all something that was self-chosen and decided. But I think I wanted to do it more so as a true sociologist at heart, to see what the experience is like, because I feel I personally haven't been too concerned with what other people thought of my use prior to that. I knew what worked for me, and I knew that it wasn't hurting anyone. Since then, I've personally been able to stop using pharmaceutical medications and return to a very holistic lifestyle and stop drinking. And I know that that wouldn't be possible if there wasn't a true medicinal value out of the cannabis plant. There's nothing that provides that many relief measures that isn't medicinal in some aspect. So it's ridiculous. And I know that we've heard, I believe, Raph, you mentioned hearing the horror stories about vets losing their benefits. And I remember in 2012 having an experience at the VA after getting into a vehicle accident. And I told them going in I didn't want any opiates. And I felt the effects of the IV and realized that I was under the influence of opiates. And I had a very stern talking to with my doctor, which was heavily notated in my VA file. And I told them, do not ever give me opiates ever again. And essentially, that distance from those types of medications prevented or gave me some sort of barrier that prevented them from cutting or affecting my benefits that I was receiving at the time, because they did only go up, and albeit rather slowly. I don't feel that I experienced discrimination on that like other people did. And I don't understand how it can be that it's one way for one and a different way for another. And it sickens me that that's the case. It was totally a different time and a different experience than you guys had. Etienne, speaking at Hash Bash back in the 90s in Ann Arbor. I remember attending those with my dad back when I was in high school. And, so it just seemed like I was raised in a different culture. I was discriminated on by my dad for joining the military because he was a hippie. And it took years for us to rebuild our relationship. So hold on one second. I'm going to mute myself for just a second.
I understand the dogs, the four-legged friends. They have their actions. Go ahead.
So, I feel that the discrimination is real, and it's something that we need to, and we have an obligation to, destigmatize, and that comes with education in the correct forms that people find entertaining and relevant. And I think we're headed there. There's a need to reach a different region of the culture, and that's those who are steadfast in cannabis's, prohibition. And we're clearly not reaching them. I mean, the popular perception on cannabis is increasing ever more every day, but it's not reaching certain pockets. And I'm curious what we can do to reach those who believe that cannabis kills brain cells based on the Nixon era study that they shortened, for the monkey research. And essentially, smoke inhalation killed monkeys, and those were the ones that they did the autopsies on. And it was easy to realize that, yeah, those monkeys' brain cells were killed. And yes, it had some correlation with cannabis, but it was because they didn't have oxygen. And for this level of misinformation to be ingrained in, our culture, it's a need to do our part to fix that. So.
I'll take this around to Councilmember Ricardo Pieda.
Grazie, grazie. So speaking about the VA real quick, I have no complaints about how I was treated and the groups that I was afforded, the therapy I was afforded, the treatment I was afforded, inpatient and otherwise, through the psychiatric unit and all that stuff. It was there when I needed it, but I do absolutely gig the VA for not listening to me about what worked for me, what helped me sleep, what helped me with my anxiety, with my general mood, staying focused throughout the day, productive. And I had a really difficult time, still have a difficult time with my VA here, engaging in this conversation in a meaningful manner. And it got to one point where I had to, speaking of discrimination, I'm getting there, I'm not just ranting, although I do that. So please watch me and reel me the fuck in if I need it. However, right, going back on point, I had this physician, this primary care doc, who made it known in some snide ways how he felt about cannabis. And generally, whenever I would go for my annual checkup, I would let it roll, whatever, okay, blah, 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 here we go. But then one meeting in particular got me. And he started going on, like we were initiating our conversation for the meeting, right? How are you? Anything new? This and that, those kinds of questions. Any new drugs that you're introducing? Any new medications? It's like, no, doc, I still use cannabis, right? And so he started going off about how he couldn't prescribe me certain things. It's like, look, I'm not asking you for new medication. I'm telling you, you asked, I told you this and that. And he was like, well, I just have to go through these things and this and that. And then he kind of looked at me, he had like a little grin, he looked back on his computer, he's like, although there's one medication I can prescribe you. I was like, oh, what's that? But again, I'm not asking for anything. What's that? Enlighten me, please. And it was Viagra. And I was like, oh, well, that's it. What, excuse me, what? He's like, well, because of, cannabis, it causes impotency. I was like, oh, hold the fucking phone. And I took his fucking shit and I looked at it. Here I'm sitting next to him and I'm like, fucking, excuse me, what? Like, what are you referencing? That made you, that fucking feel that you could make such an ignorant ass statement with a straight face. What was that you just cited? Please, let's say, oh, I'm saying, like, everybody knows. It's like, oh, okay. Well, you can go fuck yourself, right? And I got up abruptly, and when I did, he went like that. I was like, man, you're kind of a punk. And I just walked out, and I walked straight to my patient advocate's office, and I let them know what was going on. And I changed my primary care office, my entire clinic, because that was just too much for me. And then a couple weeks later, like, I had reached a what the fuck limit. It was expended my fucks. And so I walked back to the VA pharmacy with the biggest, fattest joint that I could roll, took all, like, ready to go to jail, ready to prepare to get tackled in the pharmacy. I walked up there to the window where they do the little pharmacy window. I had my joint. The lady asked me how she could help me. I lit it up. I blew the smoke underneath the screen. And she kind of did one of these numbers. I took another big hit. I blew it underneath the screen. And I said, I'll be over there. I'm going to go sit down over there. I'll be right there. And so I went and I sat down in the VA, in the pharmacy, in the waiting area, the lobby area. And I'm sitting there, I'm smoking this joint, burning it down, preparing to fucking go to get locked up, right? And all of a sudden people are like, you know, and this one lady, she's like, man. And she looked at me, she's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm making a statement. Oh, okay, right? And so call it a grace of God, whatever, right? Next thing I know, there's a kindly tap on my shoulder. And I look up to see this white-haired gentleman, a fellow vet, a volunteer, right? At the VA, coming to introduce himself to me, a veteran who's lost his shit, sitting in the VA pharmacy smoking a joint. Would you, excuse me, son, would you mind putting that out, please? Right, like real suspicious, kind of not sure how to take it. I'm prepared to get tackled, like, right? He asked me to go to the designated smoking area. Totally deflated me. Put all the fight that I had out the fucking window. And it was just right back to, well, yes, sir. And so I went and I walked out the fucking VA doors and I sat in the designated smoking area and I lit my joint back up alone. And I looked around, I was like, well, what the fuck is the point of this then? And so I put it back out and I got back in my truck, thoroughly dejected, not sure how to take this, what just happened. And I went home and took a nap. But the discrimination's real and it comes in many different forms. I'm not condoning what it is that I did, right? Unless you want to do it, but then, you know, be sure you got good legal representation. It's not the smart thing to do. It's not advisable. I was lucky to have gotten away with it. Very lucky. I didn't come up on federal charges because that is federal property, right? And speaking of benefits, if you are incarcerated for a period of time, you lose those benefits or they go down to a restricted rate, all of which I thoroughly exposed myself to. But as they say, when you're right, when your cause is truly righteous, and when you have the truth behind you, things like that just tend to happen, right? Again, I'm not trying to make a point of it. I don't go out every day and thumb my nose at the authority like that. I literally broke the fuck down. But that's what I got. Thank you for allowing me to rant. That was a rant, a thorough rant.
And a wonderful rant from a wonderful human being and an awesome council member. Thank you very much. Ricardo, we're going over to council member Michael Krawitz.
It was back, that's how many years ago is this? Not sure I can tell very quickly. It should be easier to tell what year things are from on the internet. But anyway, there was a 26-year-old former Marine who was held by the VA, and it was local here where I am, the Salem, Virginia Veterans Affairs Hospital, against his will at the request of the FBI because of something he said on Facebook. And there's a people that came out and protested. It was a big DC not-for-profit that came in and supported him, and there was a bunch of people that tested. There was a bunch of news about it. He was released and apologized. I would hope they learned their lesson, but I think that's an interesting, fairly recent event that shows how the VA can be manipulated or can play a role in violating a veteran's rights. So I just thought I'd share that. that was pretty intense. I mean, pretty crazy thought that you could be held against your will. I had a moment with a doctor. I just realized I haven't really maintained this relationship. The VA marijuana policy stems from my own relationship with my own VA doctor, who one day gave me a pain contract to sign. And that pain contract I refused to sign. I ran all the way up the food chain to DC. I never did sign the damn pain contract. But I would go back and I would maintain the relationship with my doctor simply by having her notate that I continue to refuse to sign the pain contract. Therefore, they continue to refuse to treat me. Therefore, I'll continue to be treated outside the VA. And one day I went in to just sort of maintain this relationship, and my doctor wasn't there. I saw a practitioner, a nurse practitioner, I guess it was, and I was just talking with her. I really wasn't thinking very hard about this. As I had become so routine with my doctor. It was actually really a pretty good doctor, and other than this, and kind of being blind maybe to the reality of how bad. This is one of the docs that offered me any pills that I wanted from the pharmacy as long as I can use marijuana. That's not good medicine. And good politics or good law, whatever, but it's not good medicine. But anyway, it was a practitioner there, and got sidetracked on the marijuana subject, somehow really easy. All of a sudden she was taking up our whole, 15 minutes or something like that with this in the visit. And she was taking up a majority of that time talking about the marijuana, hold it up on the screen. And I said something like off the cuff, like, maybe, we can put that aside, given the fact that I played a role in its creation or something. And she looked at me funny. She said, "Oh yeah, you and Abby Hoffman." She said, and she said, "Maybe I should check you in upstairs." She was referring to the psychiatric ward. She was ready to be in and have me committed at the psychiatric ward because I said something. And I'll tell you what, that was true, what I said. But it wasn't even that outrageous. I mean, I've met veterans that have done more, intense things than just creating national VA policy. To be threatened, be locked up in the psych ward because they don't believe you actually did what you said you did. It was a freaky moment, but that wasn't the end of it. When I went to leave this, there were 2 police at the door, and they pulled me aside and interrogated me and asked me about marijuana and stuff. I was blown away. I couldn't believe the breach of confidentiality, where she was willing to obviously talk to the police about marijuana, but they come and start interrogating me about marijuana out in the hall after having. It was fascinating, and the police following me around. I remember too, not that long before that, I had been interacting with a vet who had been followed around the V.A.C. for talking about marijuana, and here I am experiencing that firsthand. They followed me from that doctor's office right to the patient advocate's office, where I put in a complaint. And by the time I was about halfway through my meeting with the patient advocate's office, the police got really tired of being there and listening to this, and really realized how important the thing had been. Based on the response I was getting from the patient advocate, I think they left. Crazy situation. That's why, I don't recommend to veterans to get in any arguments with their doctor. Don't educate them unless they seem to want to be educated. It's a need to know situation. In the military, we had, need to know and chain of command, and follow the chain of command. You start, wherever the lowest point is, complaining to their boss, all the way till you reach the end. And before you get to the end, you will have reached a satisfactory conclusion. Chain of command really works. I proved that again and again in those things that I did. And need to know, if they don't need to know the information, don't tell them, don't answer them. I hate to be like that, but with the recruiter, with the police on the side of the road, with the VA doctor, need to know. I guess you have to apply it real time for the rest of your life. Assess people and be careful. But having said that, I've met a lot of really good people inside the VA system. Really great. And yeah, I've gotten with the last thing that I just had with my tooth and all that was fantastic service. And I really feel like I got, state of the art care, and very, very specialized and off the grid care. It didn't feel like, I know right down the road in the Roanoke Hospital, it's like just crazy busy and all kinds of stuff, and you have a little bit of space at the VA hospital that's provided for veterans that they've been able to carve out for us, and it's been successful on COVID, evidently, at least from my couple visits to the hospital. So, when I finished by saying, yeah, VA is overall good, and if any flaws that I found have been on the margins.
Thank you, Council Member. Going on over to Council Member Tony Landry.
Yeah, I have to agree with Michael. The VA, it's a system, and so it's good for certain things. I've used it all since I got out of the military. I'm fortunate to have the access to that, because a lot of folks don't. A lot of veterans that that don't get that. So, but on a positive note, I just want to say these laws are changing. We're seeing changes happening right now. So if you get out, reach out to your legislator, would try and develop some kind of network or relationship with the legislator or the staff. You'd be surprised how far that goes. If you develop the relationship, you can send some information. If you see a bill or a law passed in another state, for instance, that's going to work on an issue in your state, you can send an email to them, send them a copy of that, say, hey, we'd like to see some of this happen in your state. So just keep a positive note out there, and reach out to your legislator or your councilman. You can work locally and with your city council, or you reach out to your police chief, ask to lower the level of prosecution on calls for cannabis or for anything. There's a lot of things you can do local. So just keep looking forward to changing these laws and stopping the arrest. Thank you.
Well, this is where eternal vigilance is still part of the program, where you have to actually speak up and say what we need to say. And if we don't like the reality that we are given, we can substitute it with the one that we want to see. But that requires on you being active and me being active and calling our representatives and working on the change. We've seen some change happen this week with New York. We're hopefully seeing things coming down the pike with Virginia, as well as other states. It's New Mexico's coming down the pike as well. It's kind of a race between New Mexico and Virginia at this point. So we'll see who comes up next. But the tide is turning. But at the same time, this discrimination isn't going away anytime soon until there are actual federal or international definitions of culture that protect us, or specific laws that say that we do not deserve to be discriminated against. Cannabis users can lose their jobs currently, even in states where it is legal. It's been fought through the court systems. And I don't agree with the court's decisions in the end, stating that these people could be fired because of their cannabis use. Should be access to medical use, as well as they should be able to use cannabis in the military. I know we haven't had that conversation, but this is part of when that discrimination is gone. You should be able to use and not have any issues, same way as they do with alcohol. It should be universal in that way. But those are things for another discussion. One more thing, we'll shoot on over to Michael Krawitz.
Yeah, since you brought up Virginia, I just thought I'd give you the news. The Virginia governor, as you remember, was in a 30-day window where if he didn't sign it, it would just go into law, but he finally did act on it, and he sent it back to the legislature with improvements. So instead of waiting for legalization to be all regulated and everything and have stores before it becomes legal to possess and cultivate, legalization for cultivation and personal possession starts now, according to his amended changes this year, July 1st. So he sent it back to the legislature. They have April 6th, they have a meeting, and April 7th, we'll know. one way or another. What's going to happen in Virginia? It'll be legal one way or another on April 7th, I would imagine. And I really can't imagine the legislature not approving the governor's changes, especially since they were very much in response to the will of the people that reached out to the legislature and to the governor's office, based on equity and the racial justice issues mostly is a lot of the feedback that he's been getting. But he also got strong feedback from us. We presented home cultivation as the first rung of the regulatory ladder. That, in other words, you don't start with a small business and a storefront. You start with people being able to grow at home and share with their friends. And to my knowledge, famous Amos Cookies started because he made cookies. They were great. He loved them. His friends loved them. He said, hey, maybe I can make a business out of that. And then he went to the first rung of that industrial ladder and got a business license to start doing it for real. If you can't do it like as a trial run at home for free, without a license, then I don't think, regular people can even get involved in these things. So that's matters for medical cannabis access. Anyway, that's our idea of the first rung of the industry ladder: grow at home and share with your friends. And we presented that pretty hard to the sponsor of the bill, Senator Evan. Much love to Senator Evan and for working with us and being great activists on behalf of cannabis policy reform. Man, what a great day.
And fight for home grow wherever we are. So it's one of those things where it's good to see that New York fought for and got. And yeah, the race is on. It looks like Virginia may surpass New Mexico, but we shall see as we go into this Easter weekend. I want to thank y'all for joining us on this Friday. It's Good Friday, and it was a Good Friday. And I want to say a
It's
happy
my birthday.
Happy birthday to Councilmember Ricardo Prieta.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Rico.
Happy birthday.
Happy
man.
birthday, Rico.
Thank you.
Happy birthday, buddy.
Love you, brother.
Love you. Thank you. Big hug.
So a happy birthday to you. And I want to thank all of our council members, Dwayne Von Eitzen, Ricardo Prieta, Tony Landry, Rafael Rivera, and Michael Crowitz. I myself and ATN Fontan. I want to thank all of you for your honesty as well as your testimonies today regarding this issue. We're each veterans. We span all different generations, wartime, peacetime, but we all served our government equally. And one of the things we have to realize is this discrimination is still here. It's not changing. It's not going away anytime soon. And I have a feeling this is probably not our last discussion on the matter. But at the same time, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight and take this conversation, share it with others, educate others. We'll be premiering tomorrow night on YouTube. We'll be back in 2 more weeks with a very fascinating discussion. We'll be discussing things going on in Canada, as well as we will have a special guest, Aaron Victory, who is a LP up in Canada, as well as a patient advocate and combat veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces. And he is very passionate about cannabis. And he is going to be enlightening us as a council, as well as the public, about how and what they do their cannabis program up in Canada. So please join us for that most riveting and fascinating conversation, because they're going to give us basically a path to victory here in the United States, hopefully. So again, thank you all for your time. I appreciate you. I love you all, and we'll see you next time. Y'all have a great and wonderful night.